want to do it at first, but they've been asking me to do one for about 2 years. I thought, well, there will be 22,000 people there, so maybe we can play some new songs, but we played only old songs and they just stared at us. It was a very strange experience. Ricky Nelson died in that plane crash in 1985, which was about 6 months ago. He was thought to be broke by everyone. It cost him $1 million to get divorced. He owed money to everyone. His children were going to get nothing but debt when he died. Then his brother found a will that had been hidden, and the lawyers found something shocking. For many years, record companies stole from him. The next thing that happened made all 4 of his kids rich. The deal was so big that the judge couldn't believe it. One son, though, didn't get anything. You'll be shocked by the reason why. His birthday is May 8, 1940, and he was born in Tenney, New Jersey. He wasn't just any kid, though. Ozzie Nelson, his dad, was in charge of a big band. Harriet Hilliard was his mother, and she was already in movies. His life has been open to the world since the beginning. Their radio show, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, was well known all over America when he was still in diapers. Ricky didn't grow up in a quiet neighborhood. He did it in recording studios and sound stages. Family meals could become practices. Trips were sometimes turned into plays. It was like living in a spotlight all the time. Everything, even the most normal things, felt like they were planned. Ricky and his brother David joined the radio show when Ricky was only 8 years old, in 1949. At his age, most boys would trade baseball cards or ride their bikes, but Ricky would memorize lines and cash checks. A star rose to his feet before he turned 10. People loved the way he spoke naturally, and by the time he was 10, he was a well-known person. But being famous cost him something. There were no sports teams or class birthday parties. There were only lights, cameras, and duty. Ricky wasn't able to be a kid. He had a room as a play area. In many ways, his childhood was given up for the family name. The family moved to Los Angeles in 1941 and lived in a cute green and white Cape Cod house at 1822 Camino Palro. That house was more than just a home. It turned into the face of American TV. It became one of the most famous houses in pop culture after being in so many episodes of the show. Some fans drove by just to catch a look. But there was a business going on inside those walls. Their scripts were written. The living room was where the practices took place. Ozzie was very good at running the business. Their real lives were very similar to the characters they played on TV and movies. The show was a huge hit because it mixed fiction and truth. But it made things hard for Ricky. What was real and what was just for show? Ricky had a lot of trouble with breathing too. It wasn't just a few coughing fits here and there. It made him stay home from school and away from his friends. He would get out of breath just walking across the room. Ricky stayed inside and read or listened to music while the other kids played. It made him quiet and think. He watched more than he talked. He would later use this quiet side of himself as part of his charm. He stood out on screen because of his quiet determination. But behind it was a kid who was alone and just wanted to breathe and feel normal. Ozzie and Harriet hired players to play their sons when the radio show started in 1944. David and Ricky didn't like that, though. They worked hard to be able to play themselves. They were the stars of the show as themselves by 1949. It wasn't really done before. It was a weird mix of real family life and fun. It worked. People became crazy about the Nelsons as the ratings went up. Ricky didn't just act out a part. He lived it every day. His real life was made public, and fans loved it. It was the first reality family in the U.S. Years before that was a genre. Then 1957 came along. Ricky was 17 years old when he sang I'm Walking by Fats Domino on the family's TV show. It was exciting. Girls all over the United States swooned. More than 1 million copies of the song were sold. He became the face of teen cool overnight. Off-screen, though, Ricky's life was already turning into something much more grown-up. Events, girls, and fast cars. Ricky walked through all of the doors that fame opened for him. In interviews, he was nice, but behind the scenes, he was rude and wild. He slicked back his hair and let his sideburns grow out. Little rebellions that made his parents mad because they still wanted to be in charge. Late that year, Bebop Baby, his first song with Imperial Records, became a big deal. It got 750,000 pre-orders before it even came out in shops. It sold over 1 million copies right away and made it into the top 5 on both the pop and R&B lists. Ricky was no longer just a teen hero. He had a lot of money. Ricky, his first record, was a big hit. Being young and pretty wasn't just cute anymore. It was money. Record companies saw money in every kid with a guitar. Ricky showed that it worked. But Ricky was also making deep connections with women, and some of them would have shocked his friends if they knew about them. She played his girlfriend on TV and was in one of them. Things were hot off screen. In retrospect, Ricky said that they would neck for hours on end, which was a scandal ready to happen in the 1950s. He even gave her a gold ring that said Marianne Love Rick on it. She believed it meant they were serious. He didn't. Ricky was already seeing other women, like singer Lori Collins, with whom he began writing songs. The people thought he was perfect, but Ricky was really a youngster living life fast, and not many people knew the truth. All of this scared his parents a lot. Azy and Harriet were more than just parents. They made things, managed things, and kept things out. They didn't like how many women Ricky had. They thought that love would make him lose focus. Most of all, Azy was strict. Ricky was making $500 a week by the time he was 13, but his dad kept the money. It wasn't much money for Ricky. His dad didn't want him to be spoiled. He had that much power over his personal life too. There were no longer any rumors of marriages. It was frowned upon to have serious relationships, but Ricky started to fight because he was already used to being famous and under a lot of pressure. Parties late at night and secret lovers. But behind the scenes he was getting farther away from their control. He was still the face of America's favorite TV family. Ricky Nelson was only 17 years old when his first album became a big hit. The record came out in October 1957 and was just called Ricky. It quickly topped the charts and stayed there for 2 weeks on the Billboard LP chart. At the time, he was the youngest artist to ever do that. Some teens were singing catchy songs, but this wasn't just that. Thanks to the adventures of Azy and Harriet, one of the most watched shows in America, Ricky was already a TV star. A lot of people saw him sing and act every week. Elvis and other stars ruled the radio, but Ricky was in charge of the living room and the broadcasts. It wasn't even out yet that songs like Have I Told You Lately That I Love You and Bebop Baby were already going up the charts. It wasn't an accident that he did well, it was a plan. His father, Azy Nelson, was the brains behind that method. As the manager of their family's TV show, Azy saw a chance that no one else did. Ricky would sing a brand new song at the end of every show. This was smart, not just cute. Every week 10 million people watched. There was a lot of publicity. This song went straight to number 4 on the charts after Ricky sang it on the show in April 1957. A Young Love Story on the B-side made it even higher, to number 2. That kind of effect had never been seen before. Azy made sure that Ricky's songs were a big part of the story, and that Ricky only showed up in certain places. It was so bad that he wouldn't even let him go on E.T. Why let anyone else shine when they could have it all to themselves? After that came Poor Little Fool. It was the first song to ever reach the top of Billboard's brand new Hot 100 chart in August 1958. That would have been the end of history. There's more though. Sharon Sheely, who was 15 years old, wrote the song. He didn't want to record it, but he did. Radio stations loved it even though it wasn't meant to be a hit. Imperial Records put it out anyway, even though Ricky was against it. It went straight to number 1 and stayed there for 2 weeks. It also made it to the country and R&B charts. That moment made Ricky's place in music permanent. It still makes money for his heirs. A lot of people have covered the song, but no one else can ever be number 1 on the Hot 100. Ricky will always have that title. Ricky had 20 songs in the top 40 between 1957 and 1962. At that time only Elvis had more. Bebop Baby, his first song with Imperial Records, sold more than 1 million copies. It had $750,000 in pre-orders before it even came out. His deal was just as crazy. He will get $50,000 every year for 5 years and have full power over his songs and album art. That was never going to happen to a teenager. Also, the money from those hits kept coming in. His songs kept coming up on TV. The Ricky Nelson International Fan Club had 9,000 groups around the world by 1960. Ricky wasn't just rich, he was everywhere. He showed he could act too in 1959. In the movie Rio Bravo, he was in it with John Wayne and Dean Martin. It was his part as Colorado Ryan that got him nominated for a Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer. But even though his playing was praised, there was something else that stood out: what he spent. Ricky had a great time, made-to-measure clothes, fancy cars, and VIP clubs. He was going out with the best people in Hollywood. There were rumors that he got $5,000 a month, which is about $50,000 today. That part helped his business, but it also showed that he liked living the high life. Not only did fame make him money, it also changed him. In a strange way, one of his biggest hits, Traveling Man, came out in 1961. Sam Cooke was the first to say no. He didn't think it was right for him. Ricky was brave and it turned out to be a good idea. In April, the song became a hit and quickly sold more than 1 million copies. Hello Meryl, the B-side, also did well. One song with 2 huge hits. Ricky could hear songs that other people didn't. Before everything changed, it was one of the last big wins. He was getting angry behind the scenes. The older musicians who played on his records didn't like rock and roll. Some people wouldn't play the way he wanted. Ricky fired them because one of them told him, "Kid, this ain't music." He put together his own band, young musicians with people who liked the sound he was going for. He lost a lot of money. He got paid, had gear, and could travel, but he had control. There was James Burton in the new band. He would go on to become a star in his own right. It wasn't just sound. It had to do with respect.
Ricky was sick of being like a doll, but nothing could stop what was about to happen. The Beatles came to America in 1964 like a tsunami. Everything changed when they went on the Ed Sullivan Show in February. They had all 5 of the top spots on the Billboard chart by April. Elvis had trouble. Everyone else did the same thing. Ricky wasn't any different. In that year, his song For You just barely made it into the top 40. The magic was starting to fade. The British came and brought more than just new songs. It changed the rules. Rick Nelson met Chris Harman, 16, on Christmas Day 1961. Harman was 16 years old and already a movie star. He was 21 years old. She was the daughter of famous football player Tom Harman and actress Elise Knox. Her brother Mark Harman would become a TV star. They were well-known, good-looking, and grew up in the spotlight, so on paper they looked like the perfect Hollywood pair. That dream turned into a long, scary nightmare though. Rick was under a lot of stress from the start. His father, Ozzie, was in charge of his money. Chris wanted a fancy life because he grew up in a fancy family. Rick tried to keep up, but the bills kept coming due. Every year he spent all of his money on homes, cars, expensive clothes, and trips to faraway places. Rick was poor by the late 1970s. The fairy tale had come to an end. It wasn't very romantic when they got married on April 20, 1963. It was a wedding with a gun. Chris was already pregnant, and her Catholic parents pushed for a wedding with no food or drink. Rick, who wasn't Catholic, had to sign an official promise that they would teach their children the faith. He didn't choose it. It was an order. In order to keep the peace, he had to go to Catholic school and do what everyone else did. On the outside, the wedding looked like a party, but behind the scenes it was all about control, putting on a show for everyone. That stress never built up. It's strange that Rick's parents liked Chris. They turned down every other girl he dated except her. They were so happy to connect the families of Nelson and Harman. Chris had the right look. He was classy, well-connected, and related to major Hollywood stars. At first it looked like they were a great match, but that quickly changed. Rick had always stuck to his dad's strict rules about money, but now his wife wanted everything that money could buy. They didn't make a plan, they just spent. It got slow for Rick in the mid-1970s, but the bills didn't give up on him. Chris wanted him to come home more. Rick had to keep going on tour. His emotions and money were both stretched thin. The marriage that everyone used to admire finished with a $1 million court bill. Chris even went with Rick on Ozzie and Harriet's trips after they got married. She made money by playing herself on the show. We spent more when we had 2 paychecks though. They both didn't know how to save. There were agents, assistants, and lawyers all around them. However, no one stopped the blood loss. Rick used to follow his dad's strict rules about money, but now he was spending all of it to keep up with his lifestyle. Chris began to pull away because he felt stuck in a fake TV world and a marriage that was falling apart. They were too far gone by that time. The Hollywood dream turned into a slow-motion crash in the stock market. Rick and Chris worked together to make the movie Love and Kisses in 1965. It was run by his father. The story was about 2 teens who run away together and have a hard time living with the groom's parents. The story was funny, but the truth was very sad. Their work was already affected by the problems they were having in real life. The movie was praised by critics for its great acting, but no one knew how close it was to their own lives. Rick played a teen even though he was 25 years old. Chris didn't get much credit for his work. Behind the scenes, they were having trouble with their marriage. Ozzie used the movie to hide personal problems, showing them on screen in a way that was more painful than funny. It was odd, uncomfortable, and a sign. Rick was dying to get away from the past by 1969. He changed himself by putting together the Stone Canyon Band, which mixed country and rock before it was cool to do so. Randy Meisner later joined the Eagles because of what he did. The band had promise, but they were not on the right time. Rick used to play big places as the main act, but now he plays small clubs for little money. Meisner quit because he wasn't making any money and felt like he had no choice. Rick sings Nelson and In Concert were ahead of their time, but they didn't sell very well. Rick was looking for artistic freedom while his money and fame were going away. It didn't matter what it took for him to show that he was a real artist, and almost did. Then the moment that broke him was here. On October 15, 1971, a rock and roll show took place at Madison Square Garden. Rick thought he would get love, but instead he got booed. In order to try something new, he took the Y out of Ricky. He played honky-tonk women. People in the room wanted the old hits. Some people said it wasn't about the music. They blamed what the cops did in the crowd. Rick thought the message was clear though. They did not want the new song. He felt bad about what he did, and went backstage to watch the rest of the show. He was eventually persuaded to play the old songs again. People in the crowd finally cheered, but it was too late. Something in him broke that night. Still, there was a surprise in that mess. Rick wrote Garden Party in 1972. It was about them. It was real. It was true. It was all said in the chorus.
You have to make yourself happy because you can't make everyone else happy. That song made me feel something. It went gold and got to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. Rick came back for a short time. It was his first top 10 hit in almost 10 years. Fans who didn't think much of him before were now singing along. It didn't last though. Palace Guard and other songs that came after it didn't do well. His record company didn't know what to do with him by 1974. Albums like Windfall didn't do well. He started playing in amusement parks and got small parts on TV. MCA let him go. Garden Party turned out to be both a win and a goodbye. He used to be the star of American pop music. But by the middle of the 1970s, he had lost control of his life. He was having trouble with his marriage to Chris Nelson, held together only by how they look. Rick was always on the road trying to keep up with their fancy way of life. There are private schools, fancy homes, and a lot of bills to pay. But the more he worked, the farther away he got. Chris felt left out. Rick felt suffocated. The things they were talking about turned into fights, and the house they had built turned into a fight spot. After another long trip in 1977, Rick came home to a warm house. Instead, he was locked out. Chris had moved everything he owned into a rental house. She was inside with 2 Los Angeles Rams dancers when he got there. Rick felt shocked and ashamed. That moment made it clear. You couldn't go back. Chris said she did it to protect the kids, and blamed Rick's drug use. What Rick's team said was false, but the damage was already done. Their marriage was too broken to fix. They tried again in 1980. Rick paid $750,000 for Errol Flynn's old house on Mulholland Drive. After a fresh start, Chris told him to stop making songs and become an actor. Rick wasn't able to. He had so much debt that he had to go on tour just to stay alive. The house didn't make things better. It made things more stressful. It was said to be visited by ghosts. Sounds were made. Lights flickered, and the family kept losing money. The dream house turned into a bad dream. Things got bad in the breakup. Chris said Rick used drugs and wasn't a good parent. She said that if she stayed, their kids would die. Rick hit back, saying she was abusing drink and leaving the kids with the staff. It took 5 years for the court case to end. It cost more than $1 million just for lawyers. People on both sides were deeply hurt, and the kids were caught in the middle, seeing their parents fight. It was over by the end of 1982. The breakup was over. Rick had to pay child support every month for 4 months. His 4 kids, ages 8 to 19, were shared between him and his ex-wife. But he was almost out of money. He was tired from the court case. Just to make ends meet, he kept traveling night after night. The mental weight of everything never went away. His spirit faded as his health got worse. The happiness he used to have seemed to be gone for good. Rick was dying to make a comeback by 1985. One thing was wrong though. He was afraid to fly. He still didn't want to take the tour bus, so he spent $118,000 on a used plane. A 1944 Douglas DC-3 was what it was. Jerry Lee Lewis had owned it in the past. Rick thought it would help him save money and be alone. The plane was a mess though. The engines didn't work right. A lot of the parts broke, and more than once the band had to push it off the field. That plane scared everyone. It was something that Bobby Neal's wife asked him not to do. Bassist Patrick Woodward had already made it through 2 emergency landings. Andy Chapin, the pianist, also didn't want to get on. But Rick didn't listen to any of the advice. He had to have the cash. He wasn't able to stop shows. In September he missed Farad, a huge chance, because his engine broke down. On December 31, 1985, the plane was late for hours because of another technical problem. Rick still got on it. They were taking a plane to Dallas for a show on New Year's Eve. The cabin was filled with smoke somewhere in Texas. They couldn't see the instruments because it was so thick. Brad Rank, the lead pilot, had to stick his head out the side window to fly without seeing. The plane went down in a field about 2 meters from a landing strip near Dal at 5:14 p.m. People who saw it said it was spewing black smoke and flying all over the place before it hit some trees and caught fire. The rubble was spread out over 150 yards. The pilots who got out of the plane through the windows were the only ones who lived. Besides Rick, everyone else, 7 people died in the inferno. Rick was only 45 years old. 5 people from his band and crew were with him, as well as his fiancée Helen Blair, Donald Clark Russell, Andy Chapin, piano, Rick Inveld, drums, Bobby Neal, guitar, and Patrick Woodward, bass. The crash was so terrible that tests were needed to identify the bodies. The music world was shocked. Nelson was a huge star among teens in his time, and now, just hours before 1986, he was gone. What came next was even more tricky. Rick's money situation was terrible. He was no longer married to Christian Harmon. They had 4 kids together: Tracy, Gunnar, Matthew, and Sam. He was going to marry Helen Blair, but he didn't intend to. His mother and ex-wife were also there. Even worse, Rick's spending habits, legal fees, and the cost of keeping the old DC-3 that killed him, left the estate with about $1 million in debt. People thought for a while that Rick had died without leaving a will. His ex-wife said she couldn't find one, and moved in to do what she thought was right. David Nelson, Rick's brother, later showed a will that was made only 4 months before the crash. That made everything different. Rick's will only named his 4 children as owners, and named David as the executor, but they owed a lot of money, so it wasn't clear what they'd leave behind. Kristen wasn't joking about it. Even though they were no longer married, she tried to get some of Rick's life insurance. She questioned David's job as CEO in court as well. The court case quickly turned nasty. There were accusations of drug use, bad parenting, and careless spending of money, some of which went back years. The split alone had cost more than $1 million. There were now lawyers going around what was left. The next shock was even worse. Rick had one more child. He was born after Rick had a short fling with a woman named Georgianne Crew in 1980. His name was Eric Jude Crew. Rick first said he wasn't the father, but in 1981, a court-ordered blood test showed he was. A judge told him to pay $400 a month in child support, but he allegedly stopped after a while. In his will, Rick said that the child's fatherhood was in question, and left Eric out totally. Jeanne fought for her son's share of the estate after Rick died, but the court upheld the will. Eric didn't get any. The parents of Helen Blair also filed a claim for wrongful death at the same time. They said that bad upkeep led to the plane crash, and wanted to be paid for it. It was also fun for the families of the other guests. After that, more cases came. Creditors put in claims. Eric's rights were pushed for by G. Kristen kept fighting for the money from her insurance. Too many people were grabbing for scraps, making the house look like a ship that was going down. But what no one saw was that Rick's real wealth wasn't money or land. It was in his song. His back catalog and royalties, especially from digital forms like streaming, were worth a lot of money that no one knew about. Problem was that record companies were taking it without anyone knowing. The Nelson family sued Capitol Records in 2011 for $100 million to $250 million. Capitol was sued for not disclosing uneven income that it said couldn't be linked to specific artists, and for not paying Rick's estate enough for digital sales. Capitol was taking deductions that didn't make sense, like charging breakage fees for digital downloads even though they were meant for actual CDs or vinyl. The family said it was a scam. Outdated accounting methods were being used to steal millions of dollars. Capitol also refused to give all of the report data. Because of this, Rick's children couldn't be sure how much they were really owed. The case was over in 2014. Capitol decided to pay an amount that wasn't made public, and promised to be more open in the future. The lawyers said it was a major win. That wasn't the end, though. They took on Sony Music in 2020. This time, the case was about streaming in other countries. People said that Sony cut royalties by charging intercomp fees, which meant that Sony's own offices charged each other and cut payouts. Because of this, some earnings were taken away up to 68% before Rick's estate even knew it. The town was very big. $12, $7 million, plus fees from streaming will go up by 36% from now on. Rick's children were finally getting real money from their dad's will.